Question 30, last question. It says, consider the equation x times y is equal to z when x is greater than 0 and y is greater than 0. So x and y cannot be 0 and they cannot be negative numbers. Which statements about the variables x, y, and z are true? Select the statements you want to choose. So notice they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 statements. And the directions say select the statements you want to choose. So we might choose 1, 2, 3. I don't think there's a limit. So our first statement says, as x decreases, y decreases. So I'm just going to write down our expression up here, our equation, x times y is equal to z. And it says as x decreases, y decreases as well. So I think it's easier to just actually plug in some numbers. So I'm going to start with, let's say, x is equal to 4 and y is equal to 5. So then z would be equal to 20. So if that's what I started with, and I had 4 times 5 is equal to 20. So our first choice says as x decreases, y is going to decrease. So if I decided that I wanted to use a different value for x, and I wanted to decrease that, so let's say I wanted to use x is equal to 3 instead. So our choice says that y would then decrease. Well, x and y, you're multiplying together. So if I change x, that doesn't necessarily change anything on y. They're not, if you change one, or if you increase one, it's not going to necessarily increase or decrease the other one. One doesn't affect the other one. It's not an independent and a dependent variable. So the first one I would not select because as x decreases, y decreases, which is not necessarily true. You can choose anything you want for x, and then y, you could choose anything as well. So I would not choose the first statement. So the second choice says as x increases and y decreases, z does not change. So I'm not going to use that value. I'm going to go back to my originals. So it says as x would increase, so let's say that I would use x is equal to 7 now, and y decreases. So instead of y being equal to 5, I'm going to decrease that. So I'm going to say y is equal to 2. So if I plugged in 7 and 2, and I would take 7 times 2, then that would be equal to 14. So the second choice is as x increases and y decreases, z does not change. But clearly, my z did change because in the original, I had 4 times 5 is equal to 20. And when I increased x and decreased y, I had 7 times y is equal to 14. So z definitely changed. So I would not choose the second one either. So our third choice says, as z increases, both x and y would increase. So z in my original problem, I had z is equal to 20. So let's say that instead z was equal to 24. Okay? So how could I get 24? Well, in here it says that as z increases, both x and y would increase. So I'm saying that x would have to increase from 4 and y would have to increase from 5. But let's say that I increased y, so instead of 5 I used 6. So I would plug in 6 instead for y, but x could just stay the same. X could just stay a 4. Because if I take 4 times 6, I'm going to get 24. So z increased. Z used to be 20, but now it's 24. So that increased. But my x and y didn't both increase. My x actually stayed the same. It was 4 to begin with. It stayed 4, and all I had to increase was the y. So if I can just find one, it's essentially a counterexample that proves that this isn't true, then I would cross out the third choice as well. So our fourth choice says, as z does not change, x and y do not change. So z is 20, so let's say I'm going to keep z equal to 20. So I'd keep that there. And it's saying that x and y do not change. So x would have to stay 4, and y would have to stay 5. Well, there are lots of ways to get 20 by multiplying two numbers. So I could just say x x is equal to 10 and y is equal to 2. So then I would get 10 times 2, and that would still give me 20. So this one is not true because z didn't change. Z was still 20, but x and y, I changed both of them. So that fourth one would also not be true. So our fifth choice is, as x and y both increase, z is going to increase. So if I increase my x value, so let's say I give x is equal to 7, and I increase my y value, so let's say y is equal to 10, well, then I multiply those two numbers together, z is definitely going to increase. So if I'm multiplying two numbers together, and if I increase my first factor and I increase my second factor, then my product is definitely going to increase. I mean, that's always going to happen. So I would check then that fifth choice. And now on a question like this, just because I've checked this one, it doesn't mean that I'm just going to move on to the next question, because it says select the statements that you want to choose. So maybe I'm going to check these last two statements as well. So you want to keep going and see if there's any other statements that you think are true also. So our sixth statement says, as x increases and y does not change, z is going to increase. So y is not going to change, so I'm going to keep y is equal to 5. And then it says that x is going to increase. So in my original, x was equal to 4. So if I increased x to anything, I mean, so whatever number I'm going to multiply this by right here, it's going to be greater than 4, right? Because I'm increasing that. And then the question says, well, z is going to increase, right? Well, this used to be 20, so this is what they're saying, this would be greater than 20. Well, if this stays the same, if my y stays the same, okay, if I increase this number to be greater than 4, any number greater than 4, when I multiply it by 5, I'm going to get a number greater than 20, right? Because 4 times 5 would be 20. So if I increase this one, then the product is obviously going to be greater than 20. So I would check that one as well. So already I've got 2 that are checked. So that's why it's important not to just stop once you check one and assume that you're going to be done, okay? And I think this can help, and there's other ways to do this, but again, if you just plug in numbers and then say, okay, if this increases, so it's greater than 4, then would this be greater than 20? So you've always got something to compare it to. So let's check our last question. It says, as y increases, x increases. So if this is what we chose for our original y, as y increases, so I could choose anything for y. I could say y is going to be equal to 10. So I could plug a 10 in right here, right? And then I'm going to multiply that by some x value, okay? So if I increase y, does that mean that x is going to increase as well? Well, that's not necessarily the case because these are different variables. One's an x and one is a y, so they're kind of independent of each other, right? So if I increase y, that doesn't necessarily mean that x would increase. The question would be different if they said, as x increases, z will increase, right? That would be true. That would be more likely to be true if x stayed the same, right? So if this stays the same, or I'm sorry, as y increases, does that mean that this is going to increase? No, because you're just multiplying these two together. If this increases, and this stays the same, this would increase the product, okay? So I would also not choose this one. So on a question like this, I think, a big thing is just not giving up. I mean, it's going to take a long time because you do have to go through every single choice. And I can see people, kind of getting tired after checking the first 2 or the first 3 and kind of giving up. But, you can go through all of these and you can do it. It's just kind of a matter of taking the time, take a brain break if you need to, clear your mind for a little bit. But, I know you can all do it. It just takes a little bit of time, so don't give up.